There was no nationality being assigned or even being inspected when you are accessing any of the AI models.
Most people kind of recognize as a tipping point where we saw these models having the ability to rapidly discover and exploit vulnerabilities.
But then there was a twist in the tale. Somebody said that, hey, we have hacked this one too, and we are able to access both of the capabilities of this model, the offensive and the defensive. And now, government said, sorry, we have to log this down. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Great Cyber Podcast. My name is Aniket, and I have Dr. Bird with me. We are the co-hosts for this show, where we talk about cybersecurity. Welcome, Dr. Bird.
Hey, Aniket. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us for our next episode of our next podcast episode.
Yeah. And today, the topic that we have is AI sovereignty, a new domain that's coming up. Because until now, AI has been accessible and open to everybody in the world. There was no nationality being assigned or even being inspected when you are accessing any of the AI models. But that is about to change. Isn't that right, Dr. Bird?
That's true, Aniket. You know, this is a very interesting time in the evolution and development of AI and cybersecurity and business workflow. You know, there's been a timeline that has really been, forefront in the conversation around the shaping of national interest and the use of AI.
Yeah.
I'd like to start it around probably that June 9th release point of Mythos and the conversation around those safeguards, right, with Anthropic. That's probably what most people kind of recognize as a tipping point, right? Where we saw these models having the ability to rapidly discover and exploit vulnerabilities. And that
Right.
led, organizations globally into action.
Yeah, so true. And that's truly where they came up with the project Glasswing, and I'm sure that our audiences must have heard about this. And if you have not, you should go and check out one of our previous episodes where we have talked about Project Glasswing and Mythos as a model, what they do, what they're capable of. But then today's topic is not about that. Today's topic is what happened after that. That's where June 9th, Anthropic released Fable 5 and Anthropic's Mythos 5. They were marked as the state of the art, and they said that guardrails have been implemented here, that they can't be used for nefarious purposes or offensive purposes. When we got access to this, I was very curious. I opened up my prompt and I tried the Fable 5 to have a penetration test on a specific piece of code. But guess what? The moment I gave the prompt for an offensive ability, it downgraded my model from Fable 5 to something else, something lower. And that was the guardrail that they were talking about. But then there was a twist in the tale. Somebody said that, hey, we have hacked this one too. We are able to bypass this guardrail and we are able to access both of the capabilities of this model, the offensive and the defensive. And now government said, sorry, we have to log this down.
That's really interesting, Aniket. Again, I think the tipping point was that April to June kind of window, right, where we saw the evolution of the public release of the Glasswing project and
Yeah.
Anthropic talking about some of its evolutions.
Yeah.
When you talk to different students and people about what's happening and why this is shaping such a national interest, I shared kind of 3 points with people. AI from a standpoint of tools and technology and resources, right? That's what really organizations, businesses, and even countries are thinking about. From a tool standpoint, it could be capabilities, right? Whether that be the offensive capabilities or defensive capabilities, incident response, and even business use cases. Those are
Right.
why people think this is such of interest. From the technology standpoint, we're talking about vulnerabilities and vulnerability bugs and scanning. and
Yeah.
the ability to remediate. And then,
Right.
of course, resources. How do we address that, right? Informed prioritization. And all of that is shaping this conversation around national interests, right?
So true.
CISA released several initiatives, launched several initiatives around software bill of materials and even advancing zero trust. And of course, the prioritization of remediating, open vulnerabilities. So it's really fascinating when you think about it from a global perspective.
So true. So true. And as we said that until now, AI has always been accessible. But when
Yes.
the US government said that only the US nationals will have access, anyone who is a non US national will not have access to these models. Now, that pushed Anthropic to disable the access for these models for everybody in the world. Now, this is where what has happened in this process is a precedent has been set that if there's an escalation during export controls, access can be restricted for certain models, even if they are a frontier model, and especially access can be revoked for foreign nationals. This is now a new tool pointed at software and people, not just
Yes.
chips, not just
Exactly.
models. It's now pointing at people.
Exactly. And that's really about the capabilities of these models and the
Yeah,
ability to defend against them, right? There's so
right.
much unknown. So there's a moving landscape. The technology is constantly evolving and advancing. So, businesses, as I articulated, and national interests are really at play here. When you think about it again, in that bucket of tools and technology and resources, everybody is trying to wrangle and organize efforts around those kind of three category points.
Absolutely. If I were the CISO of a company, I would relook at my team and see that if I need access to this kind of a technology in future, do I have a good mix of US nationals and other nationals as well in my team, so that the risk that we might lose access to a model like this overnight can be reduced, because this precedent can then become a factor for risk assessments being performed by the board of directors. It can also lead to an impact on the talent and the capital as well. If the
Yes.
rules can change overnight, the calculus shifts from or for non citizen researchers as well as the investors who are weighing or who are looking into the regulatory risk of the US AI firms. So, if I'm working with a specific AI company from USA, then is there a regulatory risk that I should be aware of? I think this entire incident also points us towards that upcoming discussion in the future.
That's a great point, Anik. When you think about how the language models are trained, it's around the intellectual property and resources that are unique to that particular industry or sector or government from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So you can see in the vein and discussion point of national interest, why various countries may say, hey, we want to make sure that we are protecting our resources appropriately. So it's really a fascinating time to be in this space of cyber and AI and the evolution of technology. We always talk about the notion of uh, business and technology transformation. This is really at the forefront of it, right? And how it plays in our global business climate.
So true. So true. As a part of AI governance, one of the most important things that one must do is build an inventory of the AI models that you have access to and how you're using them in your crown jewel activities. So, in case any of those models are having this kind of a model access risk, that entire risk assessment has to be reinitiated and check if tomorrow can there be an overnight issue in an access towards that model, and if yes, then what is our next step towards that?
Exactly. And that speaks to, some of the supply chain risk conversations that we often have,
Yes, yes.
understanding the dependencies and interdependencies between data, the LLMs, the frontier models that we have within our organization, things that may be hosted in the cloud, vulnerabilities that may be discovered by threat actors, and that ultimately may yield access to that sensitive and information or proprietary information for those particular sectors.
So true. So true. And that's why when we talk about the the ripple effect of a decision like this, the ripple effect can be in the direction of governance and policy making.
Of
It could
course.
be about the technology deployment.
Yes.
It could be in the AI adoption as well. How the see until now, when I talk about the financial industry or the BFSI industry is one of the most risk averse industry. They don't want to be the first person to try out a new tool. They want to try a new tool in production only when they have almost absolute guarantee that nothing can go wrong here, right? So, so if there was a bank that is now thinking that, hey, now we have more confidence on this AI being deployed in my loan assessment or in my loan approval workflow. Now, this way, this will push them two steps back and make them think, should I need to wait for some more time and then take this decision? So, we might see some changes in the AI adoption statistics at a global scale because of this.
That's a great point, Aniket. You highlighted some important things, particularly around the commercial impact,
Yeah,
geopolitics, of course, talent, legal, and
yeah,
ultimately governance. The
yeah,
EU has the, EU AI Act that categorizes the use of AI based on, risk categories. High risk, for example, has certain
right.
controls and regulations and even prohibitions of use, for
So
certain
true.
things that have, this kind of global impact and things of that nature. So again, there's a cause and effect correlation between the capabilities of the LLMs, the foundational models, right? The
Yeah,
commercial impact, the geopolitical impact, as well as, the tools, the technology, and ultimately resources, the safety red
yeah,
lines and controls.
yeah, yeah, definitely. There is one more direction that I see there could be more progress is I remember about 1 month ago, I was in a conference about AI and privacy in Mumbai. And one prominent point which was discussed in multiple panel discussions was that India did not have its flagship AI model yet. No
Okay.
product from India was being used at a global scale, something like an Anthropic or a Chat GPT. India did not have anything. And, and a lot of countries also did not feel this need to have a frontier model. But this incident also goes to show that the AI development at a national level for a frontier model is a necessary development at a national level and it should be prioritized by all the countries. So we might see more frontier models coming in from individual countries.
That's interesting. It sparks a lot of conversations about the resources, the facilities, the capabilities, the costs, really. Not
Yeah,
only at the human scale, the environmental scale, developing data centers, because creating the foundational models that are unique for a particular organization or country is expensive, as we see in the news. So
yeah,
you may see
yeah,
the, ebb and flow of open weight models, where they're built on the foundation, if you will, the
yes,
framework of some of the
yes,
commercial providers, and then companies and countries even scope that, for their particular application, training it for data that's, specific to their national interests, adjust
yeah.
weighting, things like that accordingly. So, there's a lot of ways to tackle the challenge. There's a lot of issues at play here, and
Hmm.
it's fascinating.
So true. It kind of reminds me of the episode that we did with Dr. Ian, where we had talked about something similar that every AI model will have the assumptions and the biases from the nationality from where it was created. So he had given the example of, let's say, Bible and church. Can they have a model which is free from all of these biases? And that way, no matter from which part of the world you send the query, you get similar outputs and not despair outputs, right?
Exactly. That was a very interesting podcast where he was talking about, I believe, the United Nations, the UN, and those same kind of talking points of, you know, cultural biases, national biases, and things like that.
Yes.
So it's fascinating, very fascinating.
So true. So true. All right, Dr. Bird, I think that's it for our this episode for the AI sovereignty. Any concluding words from your side?
Well, again, I think organizations and I think companies, nations are really looking at this, from those three kind of buckets, right? The tools, the
Hmm.
technology, and resources, and that's
Hmm.
shaping this kind of national interest as we started the conversation. Whether that be
Right.
the capabilities of the foundational models, right? The technology being able to defend against them, right? The vulnerability and bug scanning and things of that nature, and then informed prioritization. How do you ensure that your interests are addressed? How are you have visibility and insight, the governance of the models? It's fascinating.
Yes.
And of course, it's moving the scale from vulnerability identification to patch. On my phone, my iPhone the other day, I saw that Apple released some patches ahead of its major release cycle. And this is
Hmm.
kind of an example of the vulnerability scanning, moving that time window outside of those planned releases, right, and product releases to things that need to be addressed, you know, once they're found. So it's really fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah.
Capabilities and ability to defend
Yeah.
is what we're seeing this window shortening.
So true. Earlier, what we saw is a new technology comes in, and the world takes about 3 to 6 months to embrace it, find problems in it, discover the need for a new one, and then move on to the new technology a year later. This time window is now shortened into a quarter. Within 3 months, all these things happen. And that's what we are
Exactly.
seeing. That's what we are seeing with these models being issues and national security being brought in. So AI sovereignty is certainly going to be the future. And I'm sure there will be newer models that will be coming up that are aligned with national priorities as well. But what were your takeaways from this topic? What is it that you thought on this topic of access to Fable and Mythos 5 being banned? What your thoughts are, please leave that in the comment below because we want to know what is it that you are thinking on this. Dr. Bird and I are going to be back with yet another episode very soon where we talk about something around cyber security. Dr. Bird?
Hey, thank you everyone for joining us. It's been an exciting conversation unpacking the topic of AI frontier models and the notion of sovereignty and what it means not only for our global business environment, but the national interest as well. Until next time, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.